we have King Laius and Queen Jocasta of Thebes. And they heard Apollo's priest or priestess, don't remember what it was, who told Laius that you're going to be killed by your son. And because he was afraid of that prophecy, they gave birth to a son. Or I think it was Apollo, the library of Greek mythology says that they tried not to have a son, but at some point they were drunk and they got it on. And Oedipus was born. And when he was 3 days old, Laius pierced his ankles and he gave him to Jocasta. Jocasta gave Oedipus to a shepherd, and they told him to go to Mount Cithaeron and let the baby die and be consumed by wolves or
die of exposure.
Die of exposure and the beasts there. And let us say that Oedipus in Greek means swollen feet. And the feet were swollen because they were pierced by Laius. And what happened was that the shepherd pitied the boy. I think that there's a rough equivalent with the history of Cyrus the Great, that the shepherd pitied him and he gave him to the people in Persia there. Okay.
Also, there's all sorts of parallels with Sargon, with Moses, with Zeus and Knossos, that the prophecy that the boy will usurp or kill the father.
Yes.
There's the same few sort of themes that come up in myths, aren't there? It's very, very similar all over the world.
I think this could be interpreted as a criticism of the corruption of power, because to think that a father would kill his son or let his son die of exposure because he heard a prophecy or something seems a bit far-fetched, at least to people with our sensitivities. Maybe people back then didn't think so.
I've always thought that a shepherd is meant to represent the sort of pure and innocence of the common people in a story. That's kind of what I think of, because their instincts are sort of presented as being innately sort of as a guardian, because they're guarding their sheep, aren't they?
Yeah.
And so there's a sort of very subtle subtext there that a good person who cares about other people, protects other people, perhaps even people he doesn't know very well. I mean, he's probably not particularly well versed in each individual sheep, I don't know. But you would presume that there's a certain amount of benevolence there, right?
I don't think you're wrong in any way. Don't think what I'm about to say I'm trying to say you're wrong. But I just think the classical Peloponnese was filled with shepherds. Yeah. We're always told that, like nearly everyone is a shepherd, almost. Not quite that, of course, but but everything you said is still also true. But the idea that it's weird that you would hear a prophecy that your son is going to usurp or kill you at some point, so you kill them all. That's crazy. That's crazy to us.
Yeah.
Weirdly extreme to us. But like I say, in the Zeus story, his father, I think, eats all the boys when they're born. Or another parallel with Romulus and Remus, where the story that kids are abandoned to die, and that they don't die and they grow up and go on to do great things. That's a well used trope almost, isn't it?
And by the way, let me just say that when people implied that gods were being unjust, there were people who criticized that, like Plato, for instance. Plato thinks that poets and mythologists, they are insane and blasphemous when they're presenting gods as acting in a puny way. And I mentioned I'm talking about what Cronus did, for instance, when he was devouring his children. Plato thought that it's completely blasphemous. You shouldn't be allowed to say things like that. To go back to Oedipus, that shepherd there found another shepherd from Corinth, and he gave it to him. And the other shepherd took him to Polybus and Merope, the king and queen of Corinth. Now, in some versions of the myth, it's not Merope the name, it's another name, but we need to bear in mind that there were all sorts of people giving versions of that myth, so that's the one that has been registered. And they loved Oedipus, and I think it is implied that they loved Oedipus because they couldn't bear children of their own, and they wanted to hide the truth from him. But at some point, Oedipus got into a banquet, went into a banquet, and there was a drunkard there telling him that you're not who you think you are. Your parents are not Polybus and Merope. And he got pissed off. He was insanely pissed off, but he followed the 1 or 2 days rule. He didn't do anything. And he asked Polybus and Merope if they are his parents. They told him that they are and that it's crazy to ask them this. But he didn't like something in the way they talked to him and the way they spoke. And he went to to Delphi, to Apollo's priestess. And she told him that you are destined basically to kill your father and sleep with your mother and bear the children of incest. And he wanted to avoid that destiny. And he said, so how do I stop myself from killing Polybus and mating with Merope? I have to leave Corinth. So he left, and on the road he met King Laius and his escorts, and they went into a row and he killed them all, except one witness who left and went to Thebes. And basically he killed Laius, who was his actual father, but he didn't know that.
Not until much later, right?
Yes, until much later.
He happened at a crossroads, didn't he?
Yes.
Which I think is a little on the nose.
Yes.
And it was a dispute about right of way, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And didn't he hit him? Didn't Laius
hit him over the head with like a stick?
No,
a club or something.
Laius nearly hit Oedipus with his chariot or something, wasn't it?
Oh, right, I see.
I think they told him to move out of the way, and he said, no, you move out of the way, and it's a matter of honor.
There's a bit, I think it's the very end of the film Castaway with Tom Hanks, where they leave the film where he's sort of physically standing at a crossroads and it zooms out and that's the end of the film. It's like, they hit you over the head with it. But in there, it's obviously it's a crossroads of his life.
Yes.
And aren't we all, when you do a big thing like that, like commit an assault or a murder, of course that's a crossroads in your life, in your story. There's one thing I want to say real quick before you carry on with the narrative, the plot line of it and everything, is again, just to sort of underline what you said, Nick, right in the beginning, is that the original Athenian or Greek audience would already know all of this. So Oedipus Rex, the play, Oedipus the King, is sort of a massive exercise in dramatic irony.
Yeah.
The audience knows, or should know, probably does know, and same for modern audiences because still Oedipus is so famous. You know everything that's coming. You know the story. Everyone knows the story. So what the entertainment value of it is watching the character become aware. A bit like Columbo, when you see the murder at the beginning of Columbo. So there's no mystery of who the killer is. The entertaining thing is watching the characters, watching Columbo solve it, watching the killer sort of slowly realise they're going to get caught and stuff.
I think that's the first time in history that those two have been compared to one another.
I'll take it. Anything to reference Columbo, I can't help myself. But no, so like you said, they do it a lot, the ancient Greek tragedians. They'll take something from Homer. Yeah. Or they borrow from all over the place. Any mythology that is already ancient and well known in the 4th, 5th or 6th century BC, and then I think you said reimagine it. Yes. Or reboot it, whatever you want to say. They redo it. They do have their own take their own spin, their own version of it. So, yeah, even the modern audience is supposed to really already know what's coming. But when the characters make a realization and it's a shock to them, it's not a shock to you.
Yeah.
You know, so that's obviously dramatic irony.
We will definitely get to
Oedipus is just the whole play is that almost, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, this is one of the major themes.
I think also it's very important because there are very clear points in the story where people could have behaved differently. Like Oedipus's adoptive parents could have just told him that he was adopted and the whole thing could have gone differently. And so, of course, the moral then of that interaction becomes so obvious, you know, it's hitting you over the head saying, yeah, if you're honest with people, perhaps bad things won't transpire. And there are so many instances in the story that I noticed where things could have gone differently if people had kept level heads and just discussed things, then tragedy need not happen. And I think one of the things that is important, particularly with the fact that people were aware of the story and knew how it would play out, and so they could see the cause and effect of the actions within the play with the benefit of some hindsight, right? And so it allows them to realise that the difference between a good act and a bad one may not always seem obvious in the sort of immediate present, but there's a sort of implicit advocacy for certain principles that I managed to sort of tease out of it. I'm not sure whether you feel the same about that, but I think it works better when you know the story in the first place, because these sorts of things, you're not as focused on how it all ties together as a story. It's more about the sort of lessons to be learnt.
Yeah, it's not like you're watching it once to find out who the murderer is, and then there's no much sense in watching it again.
Yeah, right.
There are all other dimensions into it, and I think that this is one device that was used in order to highlight the other aspects of the plays, the messages they wanted to convey, because they were putting up a story, and essentially what they were implying was, you already know how it's going to end. Don't look at how it's going to end. Don't care about how it's going to end. You know how it's going to end. Care about the journey and look at all the other aspects.
That's why I think Oedipus bears sort of re-watching or revisiting.
Yeah.
Because there are some films, stories, plays, novels, where once you've read it once and you know how it ends, there's no real point reading it again or watching it again, because there's no, Whereas, well, here's another reference, a comparison that's probably never happened before, between Oedipus the King and The Usual Suspects. Have you seen The Usual Suspects? Have you seen that?
That's a great example. I know what you're going to say.
Well, there's a few parallels I've thought of, but one of the things I wanted to mention is where you're telling the story here, the myth of Oedipus, King Oedipus. The actual play itself is only really sort of the few hours before the end, if you like.
Yep.
And everything else is like flashback, essentially.
Yes.
Or everything else is... So it's like The Usual Suspects, where the present is Kevin Spacey in the office with Agent Dave Coulion. And everything else is just a flashback.
Yes.
Right.
There's no Sphinx in the play.
Right, yeah.
It's years afterwards.
Yeah, you don't see him in Corinth as a young man.
Yes.
Or anything like that.
It's just literally, I think, a day before just moments before he realizes what happens.
Right.
It's literally, I think it's the same day.
It is, yeah. I think it's supposed to be like a few hours, I think.
Yeah.
And so it's actually the time frames, or the jumping about through time in Oedipus is a bit complicated. Like The Usual Suspects, it's really quite a complicated story. So much so that you're still getting things out of it the second or third or fourth time you're watching it that you didn't get the first time. One example to say is I went to see Oedipus Tyrannus put on a few years ago, and it was in the original Greek, but they had a thing across the top of the stage that had it in English translation. And I already knew the play really well. Yeah. I knew it inside out, have done for years. And yet still, I'm watching it and I'm thinking, wait, so where are we now? What's going on now? Oh, they must have jumped back in time a bit here. This is a flashback bit. Okay, right. So a bit like The Usual Suspects, at least the first time you watch it, you're like, wait, so what's going on now? What's just happened? How does that fit into everything? I'm not quite sure. So it is a complicated story and definitely bears revisiting.
To watch the full video, please become a premium member at lotuseaters.com.